Good afternoon, everybody. For the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started as people are joining our room. Welcome to the second day of the IEHA Spring Virtual Conference. A couple of housekeeping things, just kind of as Justin said, be sure that your first and last name are included in your screen usernames. That's for CEU purposes. If you are in a room together with more than one person at the computer, or if you're putting this on the office TV, please make sure that everybody's names are included in the chat box so that we can give everyone credit for joining us. Please be sure your microphones are on mute. And if you have any questions today, please utilize the chat box. So I will turn it over to our first presenter of the day, Brett Weber. So Brett, go ahead and I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for your time. Let me just do let's see here. Okay. So hopefully, can all of you see now the slideshow with the Norweco logo? Just want to make sure everyone can see that.
No, Brett. So I'm not sure if did you push the green button at the bottom of the Zoom? There you go.
Oh boy,
okay.
I missed a big crucial step. Thank you. So I'll jump right in. My name's Brett Weber. I'm Vice President of Treatment System Sales here at Norweco. Off camera is of one of my colleagues, Wyatt Ruck. He is a national sales representative for Norweco, someone I work closely with. Unfortunately, the gentleman who's also a national sales representative, Don Carabin, who covers Illinois, couldn't be here today because he's actually manning a booth at the Ohio Environmental Health Association annual conference. But I certainly will, pass on what happens today and any questions that come up. Just by way of introduction, I've been with Norweco now for just over 5 years. And started practice as an attorney for about 20 years and then moved into this industry and still retain a law license and everything and do a little bit of legal work. But for the most part, I'm in charge of sales here. And just for all of you, I just want to say, if you ever have questions or need information, whether it's coming out of this presentation or in the future, I just want to encourage all of you. We consider ourselves a resource. We want to be there to help everyone who's involved in residential wastewater treatment, obviously, particularly when they have questions about our technology. Illinois is a very big state for us in terms of a market. We have several great partners in the state. Among them is Conan Concrete, Rex Vault, Unique Concrete, Goreville, Norwalk Tank, and the list goes on. So we have several great partners, and they're all happy as we are to provide any information to all of you, or any of you, I should say, down the line. I want to get into 3 things today. The first, I just want to give a brief overview of our system. It's the Norweco Singular system. The Singular system can be divided into 2 basic models. The first is the Singular Model 960. The Model 960 is our NSF Standard 40 approved system. And then there's the Singular TNT, or total nitrogen treatment. That system is certified to both NSF standards 40 and 245, 245 being the nitrogen reduction standard. And our system is one that if you need to convert a Model 960, for instance, to the Model TNT, hello? Oh, it's a simple matter of a panel swap. So that is an advantage that if, regulations were to change and it was retroactive, our system could be modified again by a simple panel swap. Looking at this slide presentation here for a minute, talking about various performance standards, I think you're all familiar, so I won't spend a whole lot of time going over these basic wastewater constituents again: BOD, TSS, ammonia, fecal coliform, and the various other nutrient standards or nutrient classifications, total Kjeldahl nitrogen, nitrites, nitrates. Here I just mentioned, this is the model 960, and you can see this is a really good illustration of our system. So when you are inspecting or servicing our system, left to right here, pre-treatment, this is the aeration chamber, and importantly, the Model 206C aerator sits above the aeration chamber. The aspirator shaft goes 2.5 feet down into the wastewater. You can see there's the design flow line. And the third chamber is the clarification section. And in that are two crucial parts of our system. You see the biostatic sludge return that is cast into the concrete. And when you're talking about our green system or our high density polyethylene system, we actually install the sludge return here at the factory. And then also part of that is the biokinetic or the BK system. This is a filter, so it's an effluent filter at the outlet. It also can be a disinfection device if you're using tablet chlorination and dechlorination. And you can see those feed tubes illustrated right at the top of the biokinetic system. And it's also, and very importantly, it's a flow equalization device. Why is that important? Well, it's important because, if you have a surge event, NSF talks about working parent stress. They talk about vacation stress. It's important if a surge occurs that untreated or partially treated effluent isn't forced out the back of the system, into the drain field or into the environment, as the case may be. So again, that does do really triple duty as a filter, a disinfection device, and a flow equalization unit. One of the things you'll also notice as you're looking at our technologies, everything is accessible at grade. So when you arrive, whether you're doing an inspection or those of you who might be involved in doing service, it's very easy to remove, service, and reinstall the 206C aerator. And I'd point out that component is very lightweight, very easy for a technician to remove and to reinstall. And the BK system can be very easily removed from grade. And I just want to be clear that with this system, we have modified, and we did this about 22 years ago, we modified the biokinetic system to have a drain and fill valve. And so when you're removing the biokinetic system, water will flow out of that as quickly as you pull it out. And then when you reinstall it, there's a fill valve that can get, that should be, and that will allow, as you're putting that back in the clarifier, that will allow the BK system to fill up as fast as you put it in there. Also, very importantly, you'll note above the aeration chamber, you can see the vent cap. Our distributors, at their facilities, when they make concrete risers, if that's how their mold is set up, they will actually cast in a little hole so you can put that vent cap there. Plastic risers, which is another option, of course, typically you just need to make sure the vented lid is over aeration. Very recently, with our singular green system, we changed the design of our lids so that there's also that little vent cap above aeration. So it's very apparent which lid goes above the aeration chamber. And of course, then which ones would cover pre-treatment and clarification, respectively. Now, why is that important? It's important, of course, because we need to make sure air is getting into the aeration chamber for the aerator to be able to infuse oxygen during its on cycle into the wastewater. But just as importantly, of course, you don't want to have a vented cap over either of the other two chambers, the pre-treatment or the clarification, because of odor and other concerns. So I do just want to point that out. Next, very quickly, so this is just our test data. And at this point, I just want to be clear, I am happy to make our either executive summaries or, to those of you who are interested, the full certification reports for both our standard 40 and 245, and really anything else that you all would be interested in taking a look at. But you can see over this 6-month test that the average, again, the effluent averaged 6 milligram per liter CBOD, 10 milligram per liter TSS. This is just an illustration. You just saw this exact illustration, right? So same, the TNT model, same tankage, same components, same flow path. The only difference is the control panel. And you can see here during that NSF 245 test, part of what they test for, even as the 245 test, but in the underlying standard 40, you can see 4 milligram per liter CBOD, 9 milligram per liter TSS. This just shows the percent reduction. So you can see NSF has a specific standard in terms of both percentage and the amount. You can see during that 245 test, the Norweco Singular TNT removed nitrogen on average 68% to 12 milligram per liter. So that is a very aggressive standard. This just talks about our disinfection option on the chemical side. I'm not sure if this, oh yeah. So this next slide shows our AT 1500. So this is our UV disinfection system, and this has been on the market now for a long time. It has gotten a renewed interest because of, what we all can agree was, unfortunate events with regard to Salcor. And again, it was a sad circumstance. No one's happy about it, but the reality is there needs to be something that is comparable, and the Norweco AT 1500 UV disinfection system is, and many states, including, for example, Ohio, where I'm sitting, have approved that on an emergency basis, is my understanding, as a substitution if there's an issue with, an older model light. This just shows how aggressively our UV system reduces the fecal coliform, and it obviously meets the very strict standard that NSF has, and we can all agree that's a good thing with regard to disinfection of effluent. And I'll just close on this section. If any of you, I think all of you probably have forgotten more than I know about sampling, so I certainly would defer to all of you. But I would also say, if any of you ever want to take a look at documents we have prepared in-house regarding proper sampling of our technology, it's a simple matter of giving me or Wyatt or our customer service team a call. We'll make sure you get these, or, again, send us an email. We'll be happy to provide those to you. And these are simple 1 to 2 page documents that can provide all this information. Okay. So next, I wanted, let's see here, got to get a different presentation here. Bear with me, please. Oh, here it is. All right. Okay, so I know this really is where we kind of get into the meat of things. I know you all are interested, obviously, in service, and one of the things you're hopefully all aware of is our technology. So the Norweco technology, like all other proprietary technology, does require periodic service, and ours, like pretty much all of them, does require service every 6 months. Very important to point out that NSF requires that the first 2 years of service be covered at no additional cost to the homeowner. Now, if a state requires more than that at the outset, of course, we defer to the state or the other governmental agency. We certainly don't pretend to have any governmental authority, but absent that, it would be 4 service visits over that first 2 years. The other requirement we have in concert with our partners, our local partners, is to make sure that a system owner is offered a service contract at what we say a reasonable cost. So we don't define that. We want to give deference to local markets to ensure that homeowners have access to competent, conscientious service providers. So this talks about service of the singular green system. And again, I stress that is the high density polyethylene system. In Illinois, the concrete is probably the more predominant system, just based on the very strong precasters that I just mentioned, very well known in the community, very excellent businesses. But the plastic system, the high density polyethylene green system, is going in frequently in various parts of Illinois. One that comes to mind is Helmer, Stanley Helmer and Aaron Helmer up in Lake County, Illinois, utilize our singular green, specifically our R3 system. So we'll just walk very quickly through the service of the system. Of course, when you come on site, whether you're coming to a concrete or a green installation, you'll see 3 risers typically, 3 access covers, I should say. Again, left to right, you're looking at pre-treatment, aeration, clarification. The first thing you want to do, again, whether you're inspecting or servicing, if you want to just make sure everything's working, your first stop ought to be the control center. Here we see, of course, our WASP control center that operates both one aerator along with one downstream effluent pump. With our control centers, if you push and hold reset for 5 seconds, an alarm will sound and a light will illuminate. That's going to confirm proper operation of the control center and the aerator. It'll restart the sequence of the system. The next step is to remove the aeration chamber vented access cover. Now you can see this is an old style green lid. There is no vent cap, but there is no gasket around the edge. That's to be contrasted with this lid and this lid will both have a gasket, as we'll see here down the line. Very simple. Of course, before you remove the aerator, you sure as heck better unplug it. I think we can all agree on that. Here you see one of our coworkers. She's carefully removing the aerator from aeration. Now, again, the reason that's important, this is a precision tuned instrument. You do not want to bump the aspirator shaft on the side of the mounting casting. There are 2 set screws. You can see Wendy here is removing those set screws so she can remove the aspirator shaft. You can then see she's using what effectively is a 22 caliber bore brush on a long steel, a steel rod, and she's going to run that up and down the motor shaft. Now, what's very important is you never want to use water under pressure through the Model 206C aerator motor casing. There's several reasons for that, not the least of which you don't need to do it. Simply running the brush tool through that a few times will get rid of any buildup that has come over that 6-month period. But also, you don't want to disturb the bearings in their casing, which particularly water coming from a pressure washer will do. You can see here she's using that same brush to go up and down the aspirator shaft. Now, very importantly, 2 things. You absolutely can use water under pressure through the aspirator shaft. There's no problem there. And then you can also see if you can see where I'm circling the aspirator tip. So there's 4 little tips that come out. You want to make sure that when you're looking at that, again, if you're inspecting it, make sure it's open. In other words, not blocked. But again, you can also use that tool or a similar tool just to make sure that those 4 little air delivery tubes there are free of any buildup. You can see her doing that there. That's just with a very simple garden hose. The next thing you want to do, and we're moving now into the step of removing the biokinetic system. First and foremost, you want to use this outlet coupling tool. This is all part of our tool caddy that you can see in the back there that is available through any of our local distributors. So there are literally dozens of folks through which you can purchase this tool caddy. But you can see Wendy is getting ready to insert this sealing tool. That's going to prevent, when we pull the BK, untreated effluent from getting out the back of the system. And it's very important that that be taken care of. You'll see here, if the system has chlorination or dechlorination, you just simply remove those tubes. Very simple to do that. The moisture vapor shield, you'll see that again. You just want to unlock, just pick that up from around the 4 locking lugs and just set that aside. We'll talk about that a little bit more here as we move on. Next, you want to engage the small handle of a universal tool, which is another tool that comes in that tool caddy I just talked about. That's going to be to take out that inner assembly. You want to lift that straight up. You then want to place that over pre-treatment, and you want to do as Wendy's doing here, you put gently rock it back and forth and side to side as you spray water in there. Any buildup that's inside that inner assembly will then wash down and will actually flow into pre-treatment. That's, biological solid, so it will be a good thing during the service visit. And you want to do that for between a minute, 2 minutes, depending on what kind of buildup you have inside the biokinetics inner assembly. Now we talk about removing the outer bucket, and it's a very simple process in terms of turning those locking lugs. And then you can see here that blocking tool, which is going to prevent anything from going out the back end of the system that's untreated. Okay, well, we don't show that, but the top of the universal tool can actually fit into the groove you see right around the top of the outer bucket. And you can just gently, again, pull that up after you do want to engage that drain valve at the bottom. And that's something you can do with the universal tool. Pull that straight up. And as I told you all, the water will literally come out as fast as you pull that out. That was a design improvement, as I said, about 22 years ago, because before that, believe it or not, you had to pump about 11 gallons back to pre-treatment. And I'll be polite and say that irritated some folks. So we heard them and we made an improvement. And we also sell, I should say, conversion kits. We actually make them available for free, where you can actually put your own drain and fill valve should you run into a more vintage model biokinetic system. Wendy has turned this over. She's placed it. You can see the drain and fill valve there because this is now upside down. What you want to do is for about 30 seconds, you gently spray that media. So you have the filtration media and you have the peak flow media, and any major buildup will slough down into that safety service funnel and consequently right down into pre-treatment. And again, this provides biological solids to pre-treatment. So that's going to get into aeration. And again, it will not have a negative effect on system performance. If anything, it's helpful because our system, needs some of that biological solid. So at that point, you reinstall the aerator, and you can see here, it's basically the reverse of when we pulled it out. You, of course, make sure that it's secure. And you want to then, again, plug that in because it needs a power source. You turn that on, and then as you turn that aerator back on, and then what you want to do is you go to the clarification section. You want to gently scrape the hopper walls, and it's important that be activated when you're doing that, because it will take the solid material back into aeration through that transfer port between aeration and clarification for further treatment. Reinstalling that BK system is very simple. Effectively, it's, again, just do the opposite. You put the fill valve, put that in, reinstall by turning the locking lugs to the outboard position, just turn them clockwise. The vapor shield. So if you're inspecting a system, it's crucial that that vapor shield, make sure that's installed. It does not fasten or anything. There are 4 plastic screws that stick out of the BK system. You simply want to make sure that each of these 4 holes that are drilled in the moisture vapor shield are seated in those screws, because the moisture vapor shield does provide critical structural support, in a pretty harsh environment, we can all agree. So just make sure that's there. And of course, if you're ever taking out the BK system, you want to make sure that gets reinstalled, and again, simply by placing it over the system. To the extent there is chlorination or dechlor, you of course want to refill those feed tubes. If you're on an inspection, I just want to make clear, our feed tubes can hold, depending on the tablet, up to anywhere between 21 and 24 tablets. I strongly suggest you never have that many in there. I would say a good rule of thumb is keep it single digits. So 7 or 8 of the chlorination tablets, the blue crystal, the same with the dechlorination tablets. And the reason for this is because it'll prevent caking. If you have too many on there, what happens is they tend to dissolve too quickly, and it just can create a problem. So again, you just want to keep that at, I would say, 7 or 8, just as a good rule of thumb. You can see Wendy's doing that there with that dechlor. You can see here the feed tubes are installed. What's very important is, of course, the chlorination needs to be upstream, right? So closer to the inlet of the system, whereas the dechlor, of course, would be downstream. And that, of course, is logical, right, with the flow of the system. Again, very importantly, and you don't want to forget this, remove that outlet coupling sealing tool. Very simple at that point. That little rope, she just pulls that out. And then you want to go back to the control center, make sure to power it back up. It's, very intuitive. That obviously is an important step. If the system has telemetry, and we do, our service per line of control centers does have a telemetry option if regulations require, or if the homeowner desires it. Actually, by hitting the reset button when you leave, that will record a service visit. You can also record an inspection if you're so inclined, by basically doing that same thing. Very importantly, whether you're on a service visit or an inspection or both, and again, I know you all know this, but it does bear repeating. Take that extra minute to make sure the system is buttoned up before you leave. And again, I don't need to go into the reasons why. There are many, most importantly, safety of people and pets and things like that. We do offer, I just want to make clear, riser safety nets, and we strongly encourage our partners to utilize these. Again, we want to encourage safety, and this is just another simple step to take. These are very strong. We do make them available for both plastic and concrete risers across all our different units, including all of the different singular models that we offer. And this is just a representation of, the opposite of when you show up, right? So this is how it ought to be when you take off. Very importantly, again, it's a little easier now, but some of our older green systems still have the gasketed versus non-gasketed lids. And just take that extra second. Again, whether you're popping the lid just to do an inspection or a service, take that extra second to make sure the vented lid is over aeration. And again, you all know why, so I won't belabor that point. So the last thing I want to get into just very quickly, and then I'll certainly be available to answer any questions, provide anything further. Hold on, bear with me just one more second. So here we go. So just very quickly, proper pumping. This is important. Hopefully you guys can all see this. So you guys all know, or you found out today, that our system is not like a septic tank. Of course, it does a lot more biological treatment, and it relies upon the activated sludge process versus just being an anaerobic system like a septic tank, a traditional septic tank. Consequently, that means our system is going to require a lot less frequent pumping. And I will tell you that in a properly operating singular system, the only chamber that will require pumping is the pretreatment chamber. Again, you always want to check to verify whether a system needs to be pumped during these semi-annual service visits. We do actually make this very straightforward. We do provide our partners with step-by-step instructions as to how to determine that. And it really starts with what's called a settleable solids test. It's part of every service visit. You should make sure that's being done. This helps to see how the system is operating. And again, it'll make it clear as you're getting closer to requiring a system pump out. When you arrive, you want to make sure that aerator's been running for at least 10 minutes. You want to collect a sample 2.5 feet down in aeration. And you want to set that sample aside while you're doing your other service or your other inspection work. It's very important to leave it, set it aside and leave it undisturbed, because you can see here left to right. To the naked eye, all three of these look pretty much the same, right? Well, after, and again, we say 30 minutes, but it's more like 18, minimum 18. You can see that you'll see the settling, and you can see left to right, it's vastly different, right? So here we have about 10% of settled solids. This is usually a new system. right here is what we're looking for with the properly operating system. That's at about 60%. Then we have the one here on the right, and that's at 80%. We're looking for settled solids of 75% or less. So these two, you're good for another 6 months, no adjustment or no further review is needed. This one, though, you can see we failed the settleable solids test. One thing I also want to point out in our larger capacity systems, that is to say the 1,000, the 1,250, and the 1,500, those systems have 2 aeration chambers. So you want to make sure both of those are that settleable solids test is performed on both aeration chambers for the Norweco larger capacity systems. And again, that's 1,000, 1,250, and 1,500 respectively. Now, here we know this sample here that I'm circling, we know that's failed that settleable solids test. I just want to stress that does not mean that you tell the homeowner or the service provider that they have to pump it or have someone pump it. What that does mean is you have to proceed to a pre-treatment chamber evaluation. So in this case, we've not passed that settleable solids test. So let's go and do a pre-treatment chamber evaluation. Very simple. One of the things we tell inspectors and service providers both, when you pop the pre-treatment chamber lid, and if you see a lot of fats, oils, and grease, or a lot of non-biodegradable material, a lot of toilet paper, a good idea to have a discussion with the homeowner, again, not to change the way they're living their life, but just to be mindful that getting rid of excess non-biodegradable materials, not only for a singular, but really any on-site system, frankly, even a septic tank, is not a good idea. You just want to be careful about what you're flushing down the toilet. So again, we just kind of put that out there as a starting proposition. But what's critical to the pre-treatment chamber evaluation is an evaluation of that floating scum layer. In a singular pre-treatment chamber, you'll have a floating scum layer, and you'll have a settled sludge layer. And in the middle of those is a nascent zone that's actually, if you use a sludge judge, it's actually very, very clear. Now, again, it's still obviously wastewater, and you need to keep that in mind. But it's a very clear nascent section that you'll find in the middle. The bottom line is, if the floating scum layer is 10 inches or more, that can be easily done using really any kind of implement with a flat end. Our universal tool has it. Actually, it's a hopper scraping tool. It doubles as a hopper scraping tool. So you penetrate through that floating scum layer. When you feel that you've gotten through it, you turn it about a quarter clockwise, just slowly pull that up. And when you feel the bottom, then you can determine how deep that is. So if you're at 10 inches or more, or with the settled sludge, looking at the settled sludge layer, and you can check that using a sludge judge. That's really the best, and I think really only way you can do that properly. If that is at 35 inches or more, in either of those cases, okay, then it is time to pump the singular system. It's very important that when you go to pump the system, you do want to make sure that you're doing this properly. So again, it's pretty straightforward, and I can make these instructions available, whether inspector, service provider, regulators, anyone who wants to take a look at them. It's just important that that suction hose be placed in there, hit the bottom, remove it a couple inches, fire up that suction hose. This is not a situation where it does not need to be sucked dry. You do not need to backwash the walls. If the pre-treatment chamber is, if that wastewater or that those layers have become so thick and crusty that pumping it out might be problematic, you absolutely can backwash. But I just want to be clear, you can leave. In fact, we encourage folks to leave some of the biological material that's left in there, because again, that'll be really helpful on system restart. It'll take the system even less time to get back to its full maturation. one thing I want to point out too, if there are special circumstances that require the total system to be pumped, um, first and foremost, you want to make sure both that aerator and biokinetic system are removed. So in that instance, of course, you do want to engage that coupling tool. And also, you don't want to ever pump out of the clarification section. You don't need to do that because when you pump out of the aeration chamber, the contents of the clarifier are going to pass through that transfer port between aeration and clarification, and it will be evacuated that way. Please always feel free to contact the local service provider or us if you have any question about pumping the entire system. This is a critical consideration if you come upon a system that, for whatever reason, has been neglected or it's just been abused. And a good example of that is when people, they'll tell you there's 5 people living in the house, but, you come to find out that, there's a lot more and they're, pretty active in terms of, toileting activities and things like that. So again, that does happen, but a properly sized, properly operated and non-abused system, you only have to pump out of pre-treatment. And again, you're looking at probably on average every 5 to 7 years versus I think much more often in a septic tank. We always, again, deferring to the local and the state and local regulations, if they require, some states say you have to pump annually or biennially. So if there's a provision that allows for manufacturer recommendation, we certainly would not say as a matter of course, you should do that. But again, we always tell our partners, and our partners are very good about this. I mean, we do defer to local regulations, but and I'll confess, I don't know what the status is in Illinois, but I would just food for thought for all of you that if there is any kind of a mechanism to defer to manufacturer recommendation, I would just say for homeowner convenience, but also, so they don't have to spend money on something they don't need to do. Running the settleable solids test, and then if necessary, pre-treatment chamber evaluation to determine pumping is better than just a rote, every X amount of months or years, you have to pump the system. We always want to make clear, and this goes for concrete and plastic, and frankly, any type of tank material, although again, we are only concrete or high density polyethylene. But again, you always need to refill a tank after pumping. And this is sort of writ pretty large, right? These are a couple steel tanks that have popped out of the ground that were pumped out at some gas station and left without any water in them. And you can see the strike. Again, particularly with service providers and inspectors, that's a crucial step before leaving to make sure that who's ever doing the pumping refills the tank with the appropriate amount of water. For us, we recommend putting it all the way back up to that inlet invert, so to the design flow line. And again, I think you all know this, but I just stress the water doesn't have to be anything close to potable water, but it should not have any detritus in it, like excess amounts of mud or construction debris or leaves and things like that. Because again, those can be detrimental to system operation, and that's across the board. Again, that's not just unique to our Singulair or our hydrokinetic technology. The last thing I'll do just very quickly, and this is more just illustrative for you all. If I can, hold on a second here. Oh. Sorry, bear with me. I think this would be a little more straightforward. Just to let you all know, find a base model system. Oh, this is a good one. Here we go. Well, it's my intention to try to share a system drawing with you. Can you guys see the a system drawing, or? Here we go. Okay, so this is just the final. These are representative drawings. Can you all see that system drawing? I just want to make sure. Okay, so this is the singular. This is the base model, the 500, 600 gallon per day. And again, left to right, pre-treatment, aeration, clarification. Here's that transfer opening that I was talking about, that the sludge return actually directs settled solids back to the bottom of that clarifier. And when the aerator is running, it will take any settled solids back to aeration for further treatment. With our Model 960, it's typically going to run 30 minutes on, followed by a 30-minute anoxic cycle. With the TNT, it's running, it's factory preset to run 60 minutes on, followed by a 60-minute off cycle. And again, that is not manipulable, and that's consistent with our standard 245 certification from NSF. At this point, okay, I'll do that, I think. Yeah, at this point, that really is all the material I intended to share with you all today. And I was offered the opportunity, of course, to give the floor for any questions that any of you might have. So I think we're at a good starting point here, about quarter to 2 your guys' time, quarter to 3 hours. So I will open it up if there are any questions. And of course, I'll just say a few parting words when we're done here, if that's okay.
Thank you, Brett. I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, you can either unmute yourself or you can type your question in the chat box.
So the question, the modification mentioned to the new lids, did the inside access dimensions change? No, they did not. They remain the same. As a matter of fact, just so everyone's aware, it's a good question, because we've been molding the risers with threads at the top for many years now. So all but the oldest singular green systems, none of which I know are in Illinois, all but a few of them are designed to seamlessly mate with the threaded lids. So that all remains the same except for the actual access opening the lid.
Brett, I don't see any other questions on my end.
All right. Well, I very much appreciate it, Lainey. I appreciate all of your time. Justin Dwyer and I have been talking, and so I want to thank him particularly as well. But again, all of you, I appreciate what you all do. We are all here to help. I would encourage, as a final recommendation, I suppose, or encouragement, would be you're all more than welcome to download the Norweco app. It's very simple. There is a manager of that who will, go ahead and let you guys in. But the reason I'd suggest that is it does contain so many system drawings. So it's a very nice tool to have right at your fingertips, particularly when you're doing inspections, especially if it's off hours. But I also want to tell you, if you call here anytime between 8:30 and 5 Eastern time, Monday through Friday, I promise you'll talk to a human being who will answer your question. If they can't, one that will be able to will get right back with you. But consider downloading that app. It's very simple, just typing in Norweco with the App Store or the Google Marketplace, and it's free, of course.
All right, thank you, Brett. And with that, we will take about a 10-12 minute break, and we will resume right before 2 o'clock for our next presentation.
Hey, Lainey, can I ask a question? Is it, because I would like to hear the remainder of this, particularly Chad's comments. Is it okay if I stay on?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Just another quick housekeeping notice. If your name is not your first and last name on your Zoom account, please either type it in the chat or change your username to be your first and last name. That is for CEU purposes. Our next presenter is Allison. Allison, is it Blodig? Blodig?
Blotting.
Blodig. Allison Blodig. Her presentation is starting at 2 p.m. and will run until 3 p.m. So Allison, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate being invited to speak and share information about Delta Treatment Systems with you all. And before I start, just a little background about me. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. I've worked in this industry, and most of that time was spent in manufacturing, dealing with treatment systems. I've currently been with Infiltrator and Delta now for almost 7 years. So it's been a good run, and I want to go through a little bit of background on the company history before we get started, just so you have some of it. So Infiltrator has been in business since the early 80s as a manufacturer of plastic chambers, and many of you are probably very familiar with those. And we purchased Delta, which was in 2018 actually. And Delta was a package plant manufacturer in 1968, and it was a leader of that for many years. And they have several hundred package plants across the United States. In the 80s, there were new rules requiring aerobic treatment systems for individual homes. And so they took their technology and went to NSF certification in 1994. And at that time, there were only 6 companies certified. I believe Norweco probably was one of them as well. So then when we purchased Delta, we purchased it from Pentair, and Pentair owned them from about 2005 on. And then about a year later, we purchased Presby Environmental. You may be familiar with the AES system, or sometimes called the Presby system. And then very shortly after that, in the fall of 2019, we were purchased by ADS. So ADS does a lot of stormwater drainage, agriculture drainage, things like that. They also have a chamber like we do. So that's a little bit of the history. Then I want to talk some about the people that are involved in Illinois, particularly this is Michael Miller. He is the engineered systems consultant, and that is his email. He handles a lot of the commercial applications that we put our systems in when we work in Illinois. And we have a few systems in Illinois with our treatment systems on things like bars and grills and rural schools, things like that. So he's the guy for that contact. Then Trevor Wells, he's an area sales representative, works for Infiltrator. He's more in the northern part of Illinois. He handles Delta Residential as well as Infiltrator products, and plays a little bit in the commercial market as well. And then next, Curtis Clucky. Y'all might recognize Curtis. He's been around as long as I have in this industry. He's also an area sales representative, mostly in the south, most of the southern part of Illinois. And again, he deals with the Infiltrator products and also Delta Residential and some in the commercial as well. So because we do a couple of different types of treatment products, I wanted to go through just a generic wastewater treatment overview so that it kind of ties in our treatment systems a little bit tighter when we start talking about them. So just an overview. So what are we removing when we're trying to treat wastewater? The first thing that we're going to try to take out, regardless of whether it's commercial or residential, is the trash trash and suspended solids that come down the pipe at us. And like I said, whether it's commercial, you see the IM tank there, the Infiltrator tanks in the upper right-hand corner. And then over in the left top corner, that's a bar screen for a commercial package plant. And that is a manual bar screen where it catches the trash that comes in from maybe a subdivision or a small business, or large business actually, and then that's manually cleaned. There's also mechanically operated screens for larger systems as well. So we can't really do anything with the treatment until we take the trash out. So that's the first step. Some of the other things that we're removing are biodegradable pollutants like the BOD, biochemical oxygen demand. You hear that a lot. Nitrogen as well. In some instances, there may be a nitrogen requirement, particularly for maybe a discharging system in Illinois. In the commercial side, you may have an ammonia removal requirement for nitrogen. In some areas, other areas of the country, we have to do total nitrogen removal. And I don't want to go into that because we don't do a lot of that in Illinois, but just to let you know, there's several different forms and ways of removing nitrogen from your wastewater. So, and then the TSS, which again is mostly going to be coming out in the septic tank, and then also oil and grease that we hope is physically removed from our systems before it reaches our treatment systems for the most part. If you're talking about residential strength waste, we can handle the oil and grease that you would see in that. But in a commercial type facility, we would want to see some sort of a grease trap in front of our system if they're doing any kind of greasy food preparation. So how we go about treating the wastewater is we use microbes, biology. I'm a biologist. That's my training. That's my background. Bacteria and other microbes grow inside our treatment systems because we basically give them the right environment to do so, right? And they need these things to be able to grow. And water is one of them, and that's always there. We're talking about wastewater. Oxygen, we're going to talk about some oxygen next up. We actually need a little bit of nitrogen and phosphorus. So the microbes that grow require just a little bit of nitrogen and phosphorus to be alive. You know, it's in their DNA, it's in their RNA, it's in all parts of their cells. So they need some of that in order to survive. And then they need an energy source, which is they get that from the BOD that we give to them when we serve them up wastewater. They also need some alkalinity, particularly if we're going to be doing nitrogen removal. So the bottom right-hand picture is depicting a nitrification type bacteria. And those bacteria are what you would call an autotroph. Basically, they take alkalinity, break it apart, and create their own energy to get at the carbon that's in alkalinity. So it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer that you would need BOD for nitrification. In fact, a lot of times we will do a series of treatments where we do take out BOD first and then work on the nitrogen when we have very tight nitrogen limits. So just a fun fact to know that not all bacteria need a specific carbon-based source. They can actually take it out of other chemicals, particularly alkalinity in this case. And then low toxicity. We can deal with some toxicity, normal household cleaning and things like that we can deal with. But sometimes we get ourselves into situations, particularly in commercial facilities, where we might have a chemical issue that we would have to deal with. So we're treating with air. We are mechanically introducing air into the treatment systems that I'm going to talk to you about today. We also have a passive system in the AES or Presby, but for this purpose, we're going to talk about the treatment systems that we manufacture that introduce air mechanically. And the goal is to have enough oxygen to have a residual oxygen level of greater than 2 milligrams per liter in our treatment area, and to have it completely mixed. So the air does a couple of different things. It mixes the tank, and you strategically place your aeration, or in the case of like Norwika, who we just heard from, they spin air around and it mixes the tank. Other technologies like ours, we have diffusers, and we put them in a specific location to try to cause mixing in the tank. And then also it supplies the oxygen, obviously. And so the goal is to transfer oxygen into the solution. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is called coarse bubble diffusion, and another is called fine bubble diffusion. And the difference we'll talk about in the next slide. So when we're talking about aeration treatment methods, we're pushing air through orifices or diffusers, as they are called sometimes. And the oxygen transfer takes place when the air and the water meet. So when you have fine bubbles, they have more surface area than coarse bubbles. And here's a graphic that I'm going to show you. And coarse bubbles have their place with us. Everything that we manufacture does aeration by coarse bubble diffusion. So just a depiction of the size difference. Some aeration treatment systems use a fine bubble diffusion. You can see on the right there, those little small bubbles. They have a lot of surface area on each one of those little bubbles. And the coarse bubbles, obviously quite a bit larger than the small bubbles. And what it does for us in our cases, it keeps, in the EcoPod, for instance, it keeps our media clean, because we do have a media with attached growth that we're going to talk about. And so those coarse bubbles help keep that media clean that you can see in the picture here. That's our media, and these are our aeration systems underneath the unit. This is the next picture is our aeration system for the EA unit. And the diffusers that we make, or the orifices that we put in these pipes, are non-clogging. So one of the things we don't want you to ever have to do with our treatment systems is get into the wastewater area and have to mess with cleaning these diffusers. So that's why we do coarse bubble, a couple different reasons. One, so you don't have to get into the muck and maintain it. And two, to help keep our media clean in our EcoPod system. So I wanted to show you a little video of the underneath side of an EcoPod system. It's not something that you're going to see. That's not something that you're ever going to want to see because it's buried in wastewater. But this is a cool video that shows what coarse bubble diffusion looks like, both at the surface of the EcoPod and then underneath. So you can see here the top, and it's going under the unit, and you can see the air coming out the little holes on the side of those pipes. When I first started with the company, or actually when I first saw the Delta EcoPod system, my thought was that the air must be coming out of the elbows there at the end, but they come out of the large hole in the side of the air drops. So basically, when you're talking aerobic treatment, you have 3 steps that you're going to go through for most systems. You're going to remove the trash and solids and the floatables in your trash tank. You're going to mix the microbes with wastewater and dissolved oxygen. And then the clarification is needed in the system to keep the microbes in the system and out of your effluent, because if they go out with your effluent, they affect the quality of your effluent. And if they go out in your effluent, that means you're losing some of your microbiology activity. And so, just as was shown in the previous presentation, most of us use gravity, and gravity works for keeping the microbes in our system for the most part. There's a few instances where we may have some issues pop up, and I'm going to go through those. But in general, we use gravity to keep things back inside our system. So 2 different ways that we treat wastewater within our company: suspended growth, which is the microbes free float in what's called the mixed liquor. I always thought that was an interesting name, but it's basically they're floating around inside the tank and mixing with the food and the air. And then the fixed attached growth, where the microorganisms are attached to a fixed media that isn't moving. So basically you're bringing the food to the microbes that are attached. When you're dealing with a mixed liquor type suspended growth system, you measure what you may have heard as called the MLSS, which is mixed liquor suspended solids. And it's a measure of the material floating in the reaction chamber. And it's typically kind of a microbe count. In essence, we're counting the microbes that are growing in there, and any inorganic suspended material in the chamber of the aerobic treatment system. It's typical to have an activated sludge system or suspended growth system with a mixed liquor of around 3,000 up to about 6,000. That's a well-working machine when it's that way. And typically we'll take a mixed liquor if we're troubleshooting. It's not something that we do necessarily in the field every time, but I will show you how we do manage that sludge in the systems once we get to that. In a fixed attached growth system, you won't hear much, if anything, about mixed liquor suspended solids. In fact, if you were to take a sample of inside that box that I just showed you the video of, you would have very little suspended solids. Almost can be almost secondary treatment effluent quality right there. So you won't have a lot of TSS in there. So just a generic suspended growth system process where you have the influent coming into the aeration tank. You have active aeration, it's aerating the system. And then it goes into this final clarifier here on the side that's depicted on the side. And then again, that's where we use gravity to keep the mixed liquor, the biology in the tank and return it back. Most of the time in what we do, and as was just shown to you earlier, we make it simple particularly for the residential units where we're not having to use any kind of pump, like this shows a pump here, returning it up. It's done by gravity, as I said. So when these suspended growth reactors, the organisms come together and form a mass of microbes, and it's called a biological flock. And I had mentioned we're mixing the food with those microbes. And so an animated depiction of that biological flock is in this picture here. It contains both live and dead organisms. And then they have sticky stuff. That's the fancy name or the nice name for, or easy name for, extracellular material is what it's called. That holds everything together. And as everything comes together, it gets heavy. And the weight helps with that clarification process when you're using gravity. So very important that you have a flock that is nice and heavy. So this is actual flock, suspended growth flock. It's a good mix of the bacteria and filamentous and other attached. And the brown, what you see is a sludge particle. So they're eating the wastewater, but you can see all kinds of this filamentous type growth. This is a higher level organism right here. It's a rotifer or stoxylia, maybe one of those, but several bacteria, millions of bacteria eating on the wastewater. And this is a nice looking flock, so it would settle really nice. Some of the things that can happen, you can have what's called pin flock. And pin flock, if you have too much food, it can cause an increase in the flock forming bacteria, making the flock too light, and it won't settle. So basically, if they have a lot of food, they're not likely to try to hang together and form a symbiotic type relationship where they're all working together to eat the sludge. They're happy because they have plenty of food, and so they kind of go off on their own. And this can be hard to settle out. So if you have a system that's being overloaded, this might be one of the things that you'll run into would be a pin flock. Another issue is filamentous flock. And sometimes not enough food can cause this filamentous bacteria to expand outside of the flock, and it keeps everything else out. So anybody that's trying to get together, they get in the way. And the problem with filamentous flock is it tends to gum things up and cause a slimy type sludge that likes to stick to everything. Another thing that I've seen filamentous flock start to form if you have some type of infiltration. Maybe it's from a leaky tank or riser, or maybe it's how the yard is graded and water tends to try to go towards the tank. You can get a filamentous type growth in that instance too. So let's look at some of the delta systems that we do work with in Illinois. that are suspended growth. And the first one I want to touch on is our Enviro Air package plant. This is our commercial version of what we just looked at, right? So on the left-hand side of the screen, it shows a bar screen. You really can't see it, but the influent comes in. It goes into the aeration. You can see down here are diffusers that are in this package plant, and we aerate in this area here. And then it moves into this clarification basin. So that is something, we don't do a lot of them in Illinois. Everything that we do at the package plant is typically going to be in steel, and sometimes those aren't looked at as favorably as concrete ones. And there's, things have changed a lot in the industry where these package plants and the coatings that we now put on the outside can last a very, very long time. And I think some of the issues in the past have been when these systems have not been taken care of and maybe they corrode. But these new coatings that are available, in fact, just about any color of the rainbow that you would want to put on a package plant, we can do. So if you want a pink one, we can do that for you. So this is the smaller version, the Enviro Air system that we use for residential systems. But again, same general layout. We have the trash compartment here. We have the aeration compartment here. And then we have a baffle clarification area. So we have the sloped baffle that you've seen before, where we're keeping the biology in the tank through this slotted opening right here. And this is something that we do work with in Illinois in our IM tanks, and specifically. There are kits that go into concrete, but having the right concrete tank is super important. So these fit into our IM tanks really easily, and they're a nice little product. They come all ready to go and hook up the inlet, hook up the outlet and the blower, and you're ready to go. The Enviro Air system is a standard 40 system. It has went through standard 40 with a BOD of 12 and a TSS of 16 on average. And so these are the EA 52.5 is a 500 gallon per day unit in an IM 1060, and the 75 is 750 gallons in the IM 1530. Some of the benefits of this system, one of them I already said, is that it's lightweight, easy, ready to be installed when it arrives at the site. Industry proven solution. This is age-old technology that does work, and a small footprint by being in a single tank. A little different animal when it comes to wastewater treatment is a submerged attached growth. The microbes fix or attach themselves to the media, and the liquid that's containing the food and dissolved oxygen pass by those bacteria. And media filters are also kind of an attached fixed growth aerobic treatment process. But the distinctions between this and a media filter, and when I say a media filter, like a sand filter, we're again mechanically introducing air into the system, and in most cases in an aerobic treatment type scenario, that media is submerged in the liquid level, while a media filter is what's called an unsubmerged or unsaturated type treatment system. So the fixed attached growth reactors have an inert medium submerged in the aeration chamber, and then, like I said, we bring the food and the oxygen to them. And this is kind of a cool depiction of when you first start up a treatment system. You have this is representing the sheet of media in the system, and you'll have a few bacteria that attach to the media, and they just start to grow. And the yellow is that sticky stuff or extracellular material, and then they just start growing and growing, and then some of them will bust out and move on to another location, or the big chunk of this will fall to the bottom for storage underneath our units. And we'll talk more about that. This is a picture of our actual media that shows a very nice growth here on the left of your screen. That's a nice bacterial growth that you would see on a well-functioning treatment system. And this is what it looks like when it doesn't have anything on it. This was a system that I was actually troubleshooting, and I had the operator spray off some of the media just to show the difference. It's a good photo opportunity for me to be able to show you how it works. Another look, kind of a cross-section look at the biofilm, is the media. And as these biological layers grow, some of these that are attached to the media can become anaerobic. And then the aerobic bacteria that form on the outside get exposed to the water and oxygen and so on and so forth. And then as we aerate with that coarse bubble diffusion, it knocks some of this stuff loose. The anaerobic bacteria will turn aerobic. They are called facultative bacteria that can do that, where they can live in both environments. So really, it's a nice feature for intermittent use, because these biological layers can come and go and survive very nicely even during intermittent use. They also start up really quickly as well when there's an attached growth part in the system. So I did want to say, when you get to the point in an attached growth system, they're very nice for high strength waste. And we do a lot of EcoPod systems that I'm going to talk about next for high strength waste applications. And I brought up restaurants, schools, things of that nature. It's kind of nice because basically as the bugs start to grow in the media, the growth just gets thicker, gets heavy, falls off, and regenerates itself. We use a vertical fixed film media that I have, in the 7 years that I've been around this product, I've never known it to clog. So that's nice with that vertical straight up and down media. It's a nice feature. So our attached growth options. So this is the EcoPod series. This is a residential size unit. It's 500 gallons. And this is the reactor box that we call it. And the media is inside the reactor box. Inside this box is where all the treatment takes place. The tank is a vessel that it sits in, and I'm going to show you this. So in this particular scenario, we have a treatment tank typically ahead of the system here, so for trash and such. And then it goes into the EcoPod system and deposits wastewater on top of that media. And again, all of the aeration is confined to this box. And you saw it in that video that where it stays contained. The outside here is where we have our clarification. So because of the type of bacteria that grow on an attached growth system, very dense, very heavy, there's no mixed liquor to worry about, and so it falls to the bottom and it stays there for removal by pumping out. So that's the unique thing about the Delta EcoPod system there, that we don't have a separate clarifier other than this tank that surrounds it. So a lot of people might ask, well, where's your clarification zone? Or people might say they don't have a clarification zone, when in reality we have this entire tank as our clarification area. It's also NSF 40, but it's also 245 certified. So that means that did get some nitrogen removal. So the BOD was 9, TSS 8, and a 53% total nitrogen removal with this system at NSF. We have all of these different models that can go into the IM tank. And again, that's nice because it comes to the site ready to be put into the ground. But 500, 600, 750, and 1,000 gallon fit into our IM tanks, but they also fit nicely into concrete tanks. And you'll see that a lot, particularly in our commercial type applications. But it's very robust, suitable for continuous or intermittent use. And we did talk about that. And that dense sludge taking up less volume in the tank, so you can maximize your storage space. So this is just a depiction of EcoPod system in What we do these in steel tanks. We do these in steel tanks in Texas, mostly where they have some man camps that they're moving around, and they can pick this up in a steel tank and take it with them. So kind of cool. It's a little bit more expensive option than concrete, obviously, but just wanted to show you some pictures of our commercial systems. They are made out of stainless steel. This is the distribution where we're distributing the wastewater over the top of the media in the reactor box. So it's a stainless steel reactor box. This shows the aeration grid underneath the unit. And this is our aeration, our aeration header, where we're bringing air to the unit. The panels for these types of systems get a little bit more complex. So we have sometimes we have timers, sometimes we alternate blowers off and on in a commercial type system, but it can get more complex. Whereas it can be just really simple. This is more of a residential side system over here. So we have some blower options that we use for, this is for commercial options. We use regenerative type blowers, which are the blowers up in the upper left. They're basically big fans. They're kind of nice because you don't have to oil anything or adjust any belts or anything like that. And they run relatively quietly. So they're kind of nice for commercial installations and for homes as well. So we can go all the way down to a 3rd horsepower blower in this style of blower. This is called a positive displacement or blower. And this does have a belt, and it does have oils and things that need to be monitored. But in some cases, a lot of times we find ourselves in really large systems that we have to use something like this, or in situation may not be as big of an EcoPod, let's say, but you don't have 3-phase power. And so sometimes after these get so big, we have to have 3-phase power to run the regenerative blowers, whereas these don't have that issue. We'll go into some more of the residential type blowers in a bit. But when it comes to the commercial systems and the residential systems, we do have standard drawings. They can be found on our website. And there's a couple of different types of commercial units. The model names, something like this may read E200S or E200D would be a model number. And the E stands for EcoPod. The 200 times 10 equals the gallons per day. So an E200 is good for 2,000 gallons a day of residential strength waste. And the S stands for single, a single layer of media, and a D stands for double, which would be a double layer of media. And here's what the difference would look like. So this is a single stack of media. We can do poly reactor boxes up to the E300 or 3,000 gallons a day. And then we jump up to an E450. The E400 for us in a plastic media in the S version just doesn't work. But for stainless, we can do any reactor box in stainless steel. But if it's a double stack unit like this, it's taller, it's always going to be in stainless. And we can do the single, but then it becomes price. If you could do a plastic box, that's what you're going to do versus a stainless box in most cases. Lots of different tank options for our systems, whether we're talking about residential or commercial. This is depicting a poured-in-place tank for a large subdivision that we did in the south. But we can do precast, we can do fiberglass, and this, like I said, this is poured-in-place. And then we can do our IM tanks for our residential units as well. So when it comes to installation, and this is one of my favorite mantras over the 20 years that I've been doing this, is that as long as we design a system properly and it's installed properly and operated and maintained properly, these systems will work. There's no doubt in my mind, and there shouldn't be in yours. But there are important pieces to making sure in the installation process that these systems or any systems like these get put in correctly. And so I'm going to go through, and then this would hold true for whether it's a residential or a commercial. It just happens to be depicting a 1,000-gallon reactor in an IM tank in this one. So the first thing, we're mechanically introducing air into the system. So one of the major components when you're installing a system in the ground is to be sure that your airline connection is good and secured and doesn't break because you installed it over improperly. So good installation techniques of bedding your pipes and making sure that they're laid in the ground so that they're not going to break, shift and break when everything settles. The next thing is the influent line. So it comes out of the septic tank, whether again commercial or residential in an EcoPod system, and gets delivered into the box, the reactor box. We need everything to go into the reactor box to make sure it gets treated before it leaves the tank. And believe it or not, I've been to more than one installation where they've just stopped the influent pipe outside the box. So when it comes to commercial systems, I've even seen that even though we do have that distribution line over the top of it that we provide, sometimes they just don't hook that up. So again, important to get it inside the box so that it can get treatment. For an EcoPod system, the water level over the top of the media at or around 2 inches is pretty important to us. We can take a little bit of fluctuation one way or the other, but in general, we want to keep it around 2 inches. If it's too high and we're using like a regenerative type blower, that's really hard on those blowers. They don't like a lot of back pressure. So that water column being too high in the tank can cause some issues. So the water level over the media is set by the outlet. So the picture that I showed you earlier of the media where I had the operator spray some of it off, one of the problems that they had was they had put their outlet way down here. So in the tank. So it was the water level, was too high. The water level was way too high over the medias going outside the reactor box. It was way over the top of it. So they had their outlet set incorrectly. And so when they fixed that, we got it to settle down a little bit. But that's important to us. And then vents. So particularly when we have regenerative type blowers, that back pressure is important. And we're going to talk about vents a little bit more here. So the vent in this installation, why do we need a vent? First of all, is if we're adding a bunch of air into the system, it needs a place to get out. And so the recommended location for a vent is coming out of the riser of the system. And we ship the screen vent here to allow the air to have an easy way to get out. If you're using an Enviro air system, which it uses a little different blower, which we'll talk about, it's not a regenerative type blower, you can put your vent in the outlet pipe. They aren't as susceptible to back pressure. So if you have some existing systems in the ground EcoPod and they have a regenerative type blower, venting is something that is crucial to the performance. The control panels, we touched on them a little bit when we were talking about the commercial systems, but you want to install these on a residential system where you can have easy access, where you can actually maybe sit on a riser and work on them, or you don't have to lay on the ground to be able to see inside the panel. So install for easy access. Avoid water. You don't want to put them under an area of the roof where water is going to drip on them. And it alarms when you lose air pressure or when the pressure gets high, and that's a signal of high water level in the treatment tank. We might monitor that with this hose here on our residential type systems. There's a hose barb on the blowers that it hooks up to, and it goes back to these pressure switches. And it basically is looking for if the airline breaks or if the blower quits, it notices that there's not as much pressure in this line and it will alarm. And then if it's pushing too much back pressure, it'll alarm because it senses that as well. Little disclaimer there about electricity, right? When it comes to the aerators for the EcoPod systems and the EA systems, we have a couple of different type of blowers. One's a compressor that we use for the EA system. And then we can use a compressor or a regen type blower for an EcoPod system. So you want to keep your aerator near the control panel. Be a good place for it, within 100 feet of the treatment unit. So they can only push air for so far. And so you're going to want to keep the unit that you're aerating within 100 feet of the aerator. And don't install where you're going to have water collecting. It's an electrical piece of equipment. So you want to keep it up and out of low-lying areas. A couple of important maintenance pieces that I wanted to touch on. So all of the systems themselves are pretty easy to maintain. Anything that's mechanical or electrical, just need to keep those operating, check for corrosion, things like that. So the panel, the blower, look at those things to make sure they're running and running properly. Keeping the filters and screens that are on the blowers themselves, as well as any effluent screens that you might put on. So all of our commercial systems have a requirement for an effluent filter on the settling portion of the tank before the EcoPod system. So that would need to be kept clean. So anything that's a filter or a screen, anything that's taking in air or putting out air needs to be kept clean. And then you want to check your effluent quality. Of course, take a look at that. Make sure it's clean, clear, and smells nice. And then check for sludge accumulation in any of the units. And there's a couple different ways to do that, and we'll talk about that. So when it comes to, again, another general do maintenance per the manual and the local requirements. So when we sell a system into, that's an NSF system for residential, it's required to be serviced twice a year for the first 2 years, and then a maintenance contract is required to be offered afterwards. So we offer it. If the homeowner doesn't take it, there's not a whole lot we can do, but the first 2 years comes with the treatment system for residential. So we'll keep going. So when it comes to the EnviroAir, you want to check your aerator and air line to ensure proper operation. So you're going to look inside, make sure you're getting a rolling motion in this area here. So that means your air line is intact and delivering air to this aeration area. You want to check the vent for any foul odors. I always say when you walk up to a site and you're doing maintenance, you need to use your eyes, your nose, and your ears. The only thing you don't really use is taste, but that smell will be noticeable. In some areas, if you do have a foul odor coming out of the system, it may not be a treatment issue. It may be some sulfides in your background water. And I don't know if any areas of Illinois have sulfide in their drinking water, but I do know in Wisconsin, north of you, they do. And if you have sulfides in your background water and you start blowing air into wastewater, it does have a rotten egg smell. So for that, you would want to use some sort of a carbon type vent. But if you do smell odors and that's not the case, then you need to look for things like, is the airline really intact? Is it cracked? Is it really aerating like it should? Is the system overloaded? Because that can be a reason for odors as well. Take a look at the effluent, make sure it looks clean and clear. Not always will you have access to get it after the tank. You may have to look in the clarification area. But make sure it doesn't have an odor, it's clean and clear. And check the sludge levels in the first compartment of your trash tank and pump it as needed. And then you need to check your sludge volume and in here, your mixed liquor, so to speak. And I told you, we don't really do a lab test when we're testing for that in the field. What we'll do is take a sample of the mixed liquor out of the aeration compartment and put it into a clear container and let it sit for about 30 minutes. Will be definitely long enough. Sometimes you can tell right away, it goes faster. But if the sludge reaches 60% of the volume of the container, it's time to remove some of that sludge. It's called wasting. And so these are 3 different types of sludge. But once it gets up to about 60%, you need to have it pumped out, some of it. You're going to leave some in there to reseed it. But if it looks something like this, you're good to go. One on the right. When it comes to EcoPod, again, we're checking the aerator and the airline to ensure proper operations, clean and replace the filter as needed. Same as with the EA unit and same commercially. Ensure the control panel is working properly. Check vents for the foul odors. Same things that you're looking for here. If there is a foul odor that is not attributed to sulfides, then it may be due to overloading or a cracked airline. That fluid samples out of here as well. Check your solids level in your trash tank and check your solids level underneath the EcoPod unit itself. Because remember, this whole area out here is quiet and the sludge is settling down here for storage. So how you sample that is the same way you check for sludge in your trash tank. You need a sludge judge and you need to measure it under the EcoPod and remove it as needed. And depending on the size or the tank that you use, because we can be used in a lot of different tanks, particularly the EcoPod system, it's going to vary. And some of the commercial systems may have 30 some inches of sludge storage underneath them. So they have a lot of capacity to hold sludge. The smaller systems, not as much. They may have 10 inches of sludge storage underneath them. So just needs to be measured, and you need to understand what your tank shape is. I want to talk a little bit about commercial system design. So our package plant, just our basic package plant, is based on 10 state standards. If you haven't heard of that, it was a group of 10 states that got together and said that, hey, this is how we want an extended aeration package plant to be built. It's a standard design based on typical domestic strength wastewater. So the influent is expected to be 200 to 220 BOD, TSS around 200, and the effluent requirement would be 30 for the standard design, just the straight up aeration design. So when it meets those requirements, the aeration basin capacity for your average daily flow is going to be equal to your average daily flow. So if you have an average daily flow of 25,000 gallons, that aeration basin will be 25,000 gallons of capacity. If you have a higher strength waste, or if you have a requirement for BOD and nitrogen reduction, you could have 1.5 times the capacity of aeration volume. Plus, I mean, you might end up with 50,000 gallons of aeration if it's the right kind of wastewater. So in general, that's how an extended aeration commercial type system is done. A lot of these that go in are for residential subdivisions, so they do go in based on average daily flow, and that's how they're sized for their aeration basin. When it comes to the EcoPod system, in particular, we pay even more attention to our loads, and we use what's called the magic wastewater equation. I have probably used this equation a million times in my 20 years. Every week, dozens of times a week. Basically, if I get an inquiry for a commercial application, and let's say it's a restaurant, I want to know the flow, which is typically regulatory driven, right? And then I want to kind of dial in that BOD strength. So it's going to be different for a house than it is for a residence. And there's an example. We take that times 8.34 and divide it by a million. 8.34 is the weight of a gallon of water. So what we're trying to do is to get to the loading in pounds per day, right? So if I have 1,000 gallons per day at 300 milligrams per liter, and I put it in the magic wastewater equation, I get 2.5 pounds per day of pollutant that I need to remove of BOD. If I have 1,000 gallons per day, but it's 600 milligrams per liter, I end up with double that, 5 pounds, and so on and so forth. So it's very linear. As this changes, it goes up. As the strength of the wastewater changes, it goes up. And it's very important that when you're doing a commercial facility that you do not just design based on the flow. You have to factor in the strength of the wastewater. And how we size the EcoPod system is basically our block of media is 2 by 2 by 4, 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 feet. And at 500 gallons per day, that treats 1.25 pounds of BOD. So if we go back to example 1, where we talked about the 300 milligrams per liter, and I put it in the magic wastewater equation, and I came out with 2.5 pounds of BOD, that means I need 2 blocks, because each one is worth 1.25 pounds. At 600 milligrams per liter, I need 4 blocks. So you can see how exponentially the size of the system for these small bar and grills can get pretty large. And sometimes there's a little bit of a sticker shock when it comes to that. But if we don't size it based on this, then we run the risk of some pretty severe odors because we're going to be overloading the system. And so that's never good when you're trying to sell food, to have a septic smell right outside your door. So we want it to work, and we want it to not produce offensive odors or have failures for these people. So a lot of times they've dropped their whole life savings into this business, and if they can't afford to put in a proper wastewater treatment system, then they probably shouldn't be putting one in. And I think we've learned over the years that the soil, and I know Curtis tells me all the time, the soil in Southern Illinois is awful. So the soil can't take it either. So that loading applies to the soil as well. It cannot take a high strength waste. And if it has any kind of really high strength or fats, oils, and grease in it, it's really going to fail quickly. And that's not good for the customer. So also when we get commercial applications, I just wanted to talk about some of the other things that we take into account, because we do try to look at a lot of different things, mainly climate. When it's cold outside, and it does get kind of cold in Illinois, the bacteria that we use, the microbes that we're trying to grow, the reaction rates that they work in slow down. They move slower in the winter, just like we do. And in cases where you need nitrogen removal, if it gets too cold, the wastewater gets too cold, it can eliminate nitrification. The good thing about what we do in the industry that we're in is these systems that we put in, typically the wastewater that we see is not going to be that cold. The tanks are right next to the buildings, within 10 feet, maybe a little further, but all underground. So we typically don't see a really cold wastewater unless we get into the bigger subdivision type things where you're collecting wastewater and you're bringing it from farther out. Then you can start to have some temperature issues with cold. Too hot, probably also not going to be an issue in Illinois, again, because things are buried. But when the wastewater gets too hot, it slows the reaction time of the bacteria, because the water, when it's hot, can't hold as much oxygen in it. It's just the nature of the beast. The water will not hold on to that dissolved oxygen in the water. So it also can interfere with some of those enzymes and sticky stuff that I talked about earlier, the extracellular material. So it can cause a lack of attachment in an attached growth type system. And then you always have some issues with mechanical operations if it's really hot. And when I say really hot, I'm talking, New Mexico, Arizona, desert type hot is where you're going to see that. Typically not going to be what you're going to see in Illinois. But when we collect information to size these systems, we certainly do look at where it's at, because we do sell in Alaska and Arizona. And so we are aware these things. Another important thing is altitude. So the thinner air at a higher elevation, we need to put in some bigger blowers. We would just upsize the blowers, and we do calculations. If it's really high up, because work in Colorado, New Mexico, Montana, Wyoming, where the mountains are, it can get really high up there. And so sometimes the blowers can get rather large for these commercial type applications. So I was going to stop here and see if there was any questions. I only have about 5 minutes left, so if there are any, I'm here.
I'll just
Okay.
remind everybody, if you have a question, to type it in the chat box, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Allison.
yeah, I appreciate the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we will take a quick 5-minute break, and we will come back at 3 o'clock with IDPH on-site program update. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Our next session is IDPH on-site program updates with Chad Mormon with IDPH Private Sewage Disposal Program. So Chad, I don't know if you have slides you want to share.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started and give me 1 second. Okay. All right, can everybody see my slide now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. As you said, my name is Chad Mormon. I'm the Private Sewage Disposal Program Manager. This is my contact information should you need to get a hold of me. My email is probably the quickest way or easiest way, especially as I'm going through this. If there's anything that you wanted a copy of, an approval, or any information that I do report out on today, that you shoot me an email and I can get that to you. So a couple of things that I'm going to talk about. There's a lot of topics. I'm going to kind of run through a lot of them. So if you have any questions, obviously I'll try to catch them up here at the end, or just put them in the comment box. I can't see the comment box at the moment just because of my computer, but I will get to them there at the end. So examinations, we do have 17 exams proposed for 2023. They are throughout 9 different locations throughout the state. We have usually 1 to 2 every month. That's excluding July and December. We do have the schedule, and that is available. I post that on the portal. So if you do have access to that, you can get that, or if you shoot me an email, I can get that to you. The ones remaining this year, we have through May through November here. They are in Marion, Peoria, Springfield, West Chicago, Champaign, Rockford. For those are the locations there. If somebody is going to take it, they do need to have it to us 30 days prior to the exam. So that's why the dates on the right are the deadline dates of that slide. So if they've taken the test before, they can apply within, up to about 10 days prior to, because they've got all the material. But if they're a brand new person taking the exam, they have to apply 30 days out to make sure we can get the materials to them, and they have plenty of time to study with the study guides. We did make one change. This was revised. So if you got this, the first part of the year in January, there was one revision as far as location. In Springfield, it's still at the Illinois State Fairgrounds for the Springfield locations, but they're no longer at the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We are now at the Department of Agricultural building. So if you can see on the fair map there, it used to be that the location, or where we went, was up here at DNR at this location, this building. Parking was way out here. Now we are down here. So it does make it a little easier to get into. Similar room, easy to get to. It's pretty easy access. So this is just kind of a close-up showing how parking is right across the street, and it's a huge parking lot there and available to get into. Continuing education is the next point. If you look on our website, the Private Sewage Disposal Program website, down at the bottom, they have resources. So we have the contractor renewal page. So when they come to renew their license, they can renew it from this link here. And then the next one is the continuing education courses and for certified individuals. Anything that is posted on here can be used for local health protection grant hours also. So if you have someone that needs hours, those courses are available. Take those. So if you click on that link, the continuing education courses, you're going to get this portion right here. Sorry, my laser printer stopped working. All right, here we go. This portion right here, where you'll click to get to the list of the calendar of what is available and what is coming in the next, within that calendar, what's been approved. At this point, the last training was today. That's on the schedule that's been approved. It was a virtual training. So there will be more in the near future. As we receive them, we do post them and approve them. If you do want to schedule a training, if there's a local health department, or if there's someone in your area, or if a contractor has a new system or a system design they want to propose, manufacturer, anybody who wants to put on training, there is a procedure. We have a form. Just basically, we need to know, who's providing the training, the hours, and who's the attended, who's the audience. Is it for pumpers, installers, that kind of thing, or portable sanitation? And so there's a basic form. It's pretty easy. So if somebody does want to put on training or a field day, please contact me and we can get something set up, or I can help you facilitate that. So looking back on that resource list, on the page, the private sewage contractor search, there has been an issue with that link. I've been trying to get it fixed, but there is the link is bad somehow. So there is a working link that I do have that works. So if you do need that, please email me that and I can get you to that. We are not allowed to edit our own site at IDPH. It has to go through a big process to get it edited. So that's not sure why it hasn't been changed or why it's having difficulty, but hopefully we're going to get that resolved soon. But if you do need that contractor search, please shoot me an email and I can get you that link that has an active search that you can verify contractor license and that kind of things. Approvals. The Prinsco Water Management Solutions proposed a new chamber system. So it's the Pro 4036 chamber. It's a chamber system similar to those on the market as far as size wise, dimension wise. At this point, the difference you can see is the tapering, the way it's designed as far as the just the look on the top. But if you look at the side view on the lower left, it's obviously it's a chambered system. It does have the similar end caps, similar designs for connection and stacking storage, that kind of thing. This is a cross section, kind of a comparison between the different components or different types of chambers, so you can see the difference between the Pro 4 on top and then the other products that are out on the market there. This is just, I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's just a chart showing similarities with the others chambers that are out there market. I think the only thing different is it may just have a little bit in the storage capacity. It may just be a little bit bigger. But other than that, the sizing and the dimensions are very similar. They're all, the loading rates are all the H10 loading rates for all the components. Next one, Infiltrator. They did come out with a new chamber system. I'm not sure if it's fully on the market in Illinois yet, but they do have that. They did get approval for it. And instead of the Quick 4, it is now the Quick 5. So basically the changes from that is that instead of it being 4 foot long, it is 5 foot long. So that's just the only change. Otherwise, the dimensions, internal dimensions, square foot bottom area is still identical. Sizing criteria per linear foot is still the same. It's just a foot longer. So they did that with the Quick Standard chamber. And they also did that with the Equalizer 36 chamber. So they have both of those available. They're both sized the same, linear feet per square foot. It's just the product is a foot longer. So we do have the chamber sizing memo. I did update that with all of the new chambers. So if you look at it, you'll see the the addition, and it have all the square foot per linear foot criteria, and then the average inside bottom dimensions with the new the Quick 5 and then the Prinsco Pro 436. So if you need a copy of that, please feel free to give me an email. And I also have posted that on the portal as well. The next one is through ANUA. It is a sequencing batch reactor. So this can be used with the Illinois raised filter bed. So it's NSF 40 listed. So here's the units are the 4 through the 14th. So depending on the sizes, 400 gallons to 1,400 gallons. It is a class 1 system. So capable of meeting those discharge standards. So like I said, it is a sequencing batch reactor. So different than a system that is a flow through system, it treats for a long period of time and then has a discharge. So there's this is the aeration chamber. So it does have pre-treatment, clarification, and then a discharge chamber. So if you're not familiar with the sequencing batch reactor process or how that works, is that the effluent comes into the system throughout the day and then and is aerated, and then in the evening, usually it's like late at night or like 3 o'clock in the morning or so, when it's not being used, then that system will shut off, then it'll allow to settle, and then it'll discharge that clear water in the pumping zone. And then with their unit, they also have a sludge return where it'll take the solids, push those back into the pre-treatment tank. And then it starts the process all over again. So they do have, it's capable of using with the Illinois race filter bed, because that is a requirement of the Illinois race filter bed to use a batch treatment system. So this is a cross section of the tank. So you can see that the reaction chamber, reactor chamber, and then the pre-treatment. The design criteria for their tank and the sizing based upon the flows. So depending on what's the application, if you're using it for residential or non-residential, you'll be able to size the system on what's needed or required. Another cross section of the tank. The next one is the HOOT system. This is the LA HOOT 500. It is, they have the design criteria from 500 gallons a day to 1,000 gallons a day systems. So it is an NSF standard 40 approved. This is the cross section of their unit with the pre-treatment tank, aeration component, and the clarification zone. So that's another unit that is available. The next thing, the EcoFlow EnviroChlor tablet chlorinators. It is a NSF standard 46. The chlorinator tube has been approved and met NSF 40 standard or 46 standards. So they are able to use the system that met the requirements of our private sewage disposal code, which is 905-120F for disinfection, those standards. So that they can use this. It can be certified to use without a contact chamber because it has met the requirements of NSF. So it's a little bit different than what's been used in the past as far as just having a chlorine tube and a 50-gallon contact chamber to assure that it was getting proper treatment. They have with that, the NSF test, 46 test, it did prove that it did get the requirements. One thing that is in addition with the 46, NSF standard 46, is they treat to 200 parts per million, where our code requires the 400 parts per million. So the NSF 46 is a much stricter standard than the state code as far as the discharge requirement. So it did meet that criteria. One of the factors, though, of that approval is that you have to use the 2 tablets that are certified by that or that are established by that certification. So you have to use either the Pro-Chlor tabs or the PPG AccuTab chemical tablets. So they have to use those if they're going to use that without the contact chamber, and they're use that, as the certification has been approved. They have to use either one of those tablets. They can't use any other product. So that's one thing that if you're going to have them, they just need to make sure they're aware of that, and the homeowner is aware of that they have to use those 2 products per the approval. Seasonal rental properties. This is something that has been brought to the attention of the department with certain failures of some systems as a homeowner changes their residential property into a vacation rental or a weekly or short-term rental. Some of those the application rates are changing, 3 to 4 times the number of people that were proposed or designed for that structure. So if you're looking at a 3-bedroom house that was designed to treat 6,000 or 600 gallons per day, they're converting some of those bedrooms to bunk bedrooms, where it may have 6 to 8 people in that one room, which is going to increase the number, obviously, the gallons per day, because of the number of increase of individual in the building. Some of those that design almost doubles the size, and they've seen failures on those systems. So with any unit, at that point, it's not necessarily considered a residential unit anymore. It's almost non-residential because it's the use that it's using. It's almost like a hotel or that kind of configuration. So the design of that is going to have to change when they're looking at that. So if they're advertising that as the VRBO or a rental property, then they're going to have to size it per the number of people that are going to be at that facility are going to be using it. So this is going to be a huge change for some system sizes, so that you have to utilize what's ever going to be larger. So if, as you're looking at the system and the system design, if there's 3 bedrooms, that per our code as we define them, the minimum would be 600 gallons. But if they're looking at designing it for, the number of people, they're going to have to look to see which is greater. And that design is going to be based upon 50 gallons per person per day. And that's within the private sewage disposal code. As you look for boarding houses, that design criteria. So it's in Appendix A under the quantity flows of sewage flows under boarding houses. It's 50 gallons per person. So as we're sizing those systems, whatever they're advertising it as, that's what they're going to have to, if they say, okay, we're not going to have that many people, we're going to make the system smaller or fewer people, that's fine. But if it's ever advertised, that you'll have to put that in writing, or establish that with the permit was sized based upon these number of people. And I know it's sometimes it's hard to, address that, after it's been installed. But, if they're ever advertising it or you're seeing it, or if there's an issue with the system because it's not functioning properly because they put in a smaller system, oops, sorry about that. They will have to size it per the criteria of the code. Since it's non-residential at that point, they have to size it per the number of persons and the boarding house criteria. The next thing is the iron curtain system. This is a component that was added to a couple of systems, and there was failure after this system was added. From what I'm hearing is that the use of this system is increasing the amount of water used going to the system. So I still am waiting on a contact from an individual within the manufacturer to kind of give me the actual much water is actually pushed back from these during the flush or the regeneration portion for these systems. But I know as with water softeners, sometimes, one cycle is great. So let's do multiple cycles, and that may cause, increased amount of water coming back to these systems. They are considered a green system just because there are no chemicals added to the system. It's just used by aeration and filtration. They're removing the iron and the manganese and the sulfur from the water. So that they have the hard water office or issues, then those are going to be removed through this process. So like I mentioned, it is considered a green system, but the issue is with the regeneration after the flushing the filter, how much water is actually being used and pushing back into those minerals back into the system or into the septic system. So as soon as I get more information on that, we'll definitely pass that on, or if there's a need to address that or modify or make any changes or any recommendations, we'll look at that. But and it's hard to say if the two systems that failed immediately or very shortly after those systems were added on, if there was other factors that might have been contributing to that. But those are going to be some things that I'll try to do some more research and get those answers out to you. The NPDES permit, as many of you know, US EPA no longer issues the permit. That is now done by Illinois EPA since 2019. So they are issuing February 2020 is when Illinois EPA took over. They do offer those permits. If you have questions as far as when they need to get a discharge, They do have the authority over that, so I would recommend you contacting them. They have on if you go to the ILG 62 website for permits, if you search that, it'll give you contact information. There was some change within that program, and I'm not sure who the head person is at this point. I haven't been told who that was or haven't been heard yet. So, but if you contact them and ask for the engineer on duty, then they'll be able to help you answer those questions regarding the NPDES permit. This is the ILG 62 website. So it does have the form on there, the economic feasibility calculator, and all that, notice of intent. And also it does have in the center part, the notices. If you're going to look to see if you had one submitted, where it's at, and how soon it'll be coming out. So when looking at that website that I was just on, this is their link. But like I said before, if you just Google ILG 62 Illinois EPA, you'll be able to find that pretty easy. So this is that notice of intent page. So at this point, I think they have 333 is the NPDES number that they're working on. It was last submitted March 31st. One thing is they have to, by the code, they have a period of 14 days that they have to post these on the website as part of the approval process. So if you are looking to see if one's been approved or if they're, what the status is, that should be posted on here if it's in that category of the period, 14-day period. The UCCGP program is the Unsewered Community Construction Grant Program. This is done by Illinois EPA with funds that they have available for wastewater systems, sanitary sewers. It's a grant program, so they do have money available through, they do understand that there are quite a few communities in the Illinois that are unsewered, typically the wildcat sewers, those kind of issues, or systems where they need an extension, and there's the income, or there's not a lot of money available for that community. So this is a way for a few communities each year to get that sewer extension or to get that sewer development through the state with the grants. This the second year they've done it. So each year they give about $20 million. So there's about 4 to 5 systems that are going to get those funds. I know that doesn't take a big chunk out of the 200, but at least it is a starting process, and they can get some of those resolved with getting sanitary sewers. Some individuals were concerned that, you're trying to get those grants submitted. Takes a lot of funding just to get the grants submitted, just to get the footwork, to get all of the paperwork done. If you have large communities, they usually have people that are on staff that can help develop that and do that. But the smaller communities don't have those people on staff. So the Illinois EPA did do a grant program where they offer $1 million each year for the plan development to submit those requests. So individual communities can apply for that money to help with developing the money for the proposal. So that is an option for them to help facilitate that, to get those or to get the grant available, or to get a proposal available. The next thing is annexation regulations. Had few people have contacted me recently regarding the annexation of properties. Since if they're not in the incorporated area, the Private Sewage Disposal Code and Act cannot force annexation into a municipality. Even if the sanitary sewer is running on their property, we cannot force annexation. So this usually is commonly done through local regulations or the sanitary district. They may have language that mandates that, so if the local municipality or sanitary district extended the sewers and then basically stated that if, when your system fails, that you'll have to connect to sanitary sewer, which that's fine because that's the local municipality, the local ordinance that is forcing the connection. But as far as the state code, if they don't have anything in their language that specifies they have to connect, the state code cannot force them to become annexed into that municipality to connect to the sanitary sewer. Excuse me. Going on to then connection to sanitary sewer is another issue that's been brought up recently, as far as, you know, when a person has to connect or how the mandating that connect and what type of system. And this is the section that deals with the private sewage connection to sanitary sewer or the use of a private sewage disposal system. So depending on what the type of the system is, if it's residential or non-residential, it can be 300 feet residential property, or non-residentials with flows less than 1,500 gallons per day, or within 1,000 feet for non-residential properties with flows that are equal to or greater than 1,500 gallons per day. So in the thing there is that unless physical barriers or local ordinance exist that prevents connection to the sewer. So if the sanitary district is already at capacity, or if there's something, a physical barrier that, you know, they cannot connect, you know, if there's a highway or something that they have to go around, something that would cause them, you know, it would cost a lot to connect, we will not force connection at that point. The same goes then by the connection, and this is kind of the key factor here. A connection is done by an individual 4-inch line. So it has to be basically gravity flow through a 4-inch line to connect to that sewer for it to be mandated connection. We can't force pump and horizontal boring, that kind of thing, you know, to get to a sanitary sewer. It has to be done by just a 4-inch line. So with that, we can't force a connection if they can't get to it by a 4-inch line. So as I said, the local jurisdiction, they can put in more stringent language in their ordinance if they'd like to, that would say, you know, if you're within that 300 feet, that you connect and not have any, you know, any other, you know, by either by pump or any other connection, and mandate a more stringent. But, you know, as for the state code, we can't force that. Usually, like I said before, usually it's established by the municipal or sanitary district that have those connections when they develop the sewers or they extend it, that the regulation is put in at that point. Is when somebody fails, then they have to connect. NSF standard changes are proposed. So we're looking at the disinfection standards that they have. They have NSF has a wastewater committee, and they are looking at the different types of disinfection, 3 main types: the UV, ozone, and chlorination. And so they're looking at that and how factors, you know, they're saying that there'll be some areas that need multiple methods of disinfection to protect public health, depending on what the receiving environment is. At this point, I don't see Illinois seeing multiple disinfection processes, but this is just something that's a national looked at across the nation totally. So with this standard change, they're transitioning from NSF ANSI 46, which is the current standard for disinfection devices and components, and then moving that over to an ANSI NSF 385 for disinfection mechanics. So it's a specific standard for that alone. And this would be for NSF 350 systems and NSF 40 systems. So it's basically just going to be an evaluation process for chlorine, UV, and ozone to be utilized on wastewater. So it'll have same standards. They're looking at getting this adopted in the next 5-year process would be finalized probably in February of 2025. So anything that's currently approved under the Illinois approval would still be approved. New technologies could use this standard to get approved in the state. They could get theirs tested to NSF ANSI 385. So the evaluation, they're going to probably start evaluating in 2025. As I mentioned before, this can be used for NSF 40 or NSF 350. NSF 40, obviously, the common system in Illinois, and there are more NSF 350 systems coming in. NSF 350 is actually a water reuse standard, so that can be the effluent from the NSF 350 system can be reused for non-potable sources, toilet flushing, car washes, or irrigation back into a structure. They could be used for decorative fountains, not water fountains, but decorative fountains or other applications for water, but it would have to require a disinfection to go back into the structure. So those could fall under the ANSI 385 scope. So basically all of them be tested with the same effluent. The NSF 46 standard, different from from what I've seen from 385. The NSF 46, they put the system in, they have it operating for over a month, and then they do an evaluation on it to see what the effluent is based upon the flows and those criteria. So they do a lot of different testing on there through that entire time to see, but the biological and parts per million in that one test shows them how well that system's operating at those flows. So I think this is going to be a more detailed analysis of those units over a little bit of longer period of time also. So as we get more information available, or as we know more about those standards becoming or changing, I will definitely make that available to everybody, and then so everybody will be aware. One thing is we have a relocation of one of our regional offices. This is kind of the state map you can find online with our regional office locations. The Edwardsville regional office is now called the Metro East regional office. So the phone number has just remained the same, but the office location obviously has changed. So if you need to get a hold of them, or if you want to stop by their office, they have moved, and that would be the new location. With that, I am open to any questions, or if there's anything that I did not touch that somebody has questions about, definitely can cover that.
Thank you, Chad. I'll remind everybody again, if you would like to ask a question, you can do so in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. Chad, I'm not seeing anything on my end.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, if anybody has any questions later on, feel free to email me, and I will get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our sessions for today. The next session of the IEHA Spring Virtual Conference will be next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Thank you. Bye-bye.